Dementia Researcher with a blog and a rating.
As we approach Motor Neuron Disease Awareness Day, I think it's important to look at this condition with a wide lens. Similar to something like Alzheimer's disease, MND is an illness where only a fraction of cases can be purely attributed to genetics. So-called familial MND, i.e. cases where the disease is genetically inherited, only accounts for around 1 in 10 patients. This is more than the 1 in 100 for Alzheimer's, but it leaves us with a very similar burning question. What's driving the other 90% of cases? If you're familiar with my blogs or podcasts here, it'll be no surprise to you that I'm asking this question. I'm fascinated with the influence of environmental factors on our neurological health. I'm becoming increasingly convinced that the food we put on our plates and the lifestyle we lead is a very significant contributor to how well our brains age. If you pull up a map showing the occurrence of westernized diets across the globe and compare it to a heat map of dementia cases, the result is at the very least compelling. Correlation is not causation, but it does appear as if anywhere where you find less processed burgers and hot dogs and more consumption of fresh, healthy food and a lot of plants, people age better. The big hotspots for dementia seem to be the USA, Western Europe, and there's no denying that our diets are nowhere near as healthy as South America, Southeast Asia, etc. We are addicted to highly processed foods and try our best to ignore the impact they have on our health. The evidence for diet in Alzheimer's disease is becoming increasingly clear, and we now have the MIND diet as a recommendation to reduce our risk. It consists of mostly plant-based foods with the added consumption of fish, and multiple studies appear to show benefits of it in relation to cognitive health. This leads me to my question. Can diet also reduce the risk of developing motor neuron disease? If so, which diet and how sound is the data? Depending on what blogger or influencer you follow, you could get told to go keto, paleo, vegan, carnivore. Please don't do this because it's catastrophic. Or Mediterranean. So does any evidence stack up behind them? Well, I've done a deep dive into this so you don't have to. So let's jump in one by one. So number 1, the carnivore diet. Now this one is by far the most controversial. Eating only animal products that are high in fat seems hugely antithetical to promoting neuronal health. Saturated fats, cholesterol, dietary glutamate, they all have studies suggesting they are acting contrary to brain health. You're never going to convince me that a carnivore diet is going to do a healthy person any good whatsoever. Your body needs diverse nutrients, and packing your colon with meat 3 times a day seems to be a recipe for colon cancer. However, there is a very strange phenomenon that's been reported in a few studies, but is hotly debated, so take it with a pinch of salt. Some studies suggest that once a patient is diagnosed with MND, an increased consumption in saturated fats could improve the survival rates of patients. Getting enough calories into a patient with motor neuron disease can be challenging, and a carnivore diet could potentially help to stabilise body weight. Furthermore, some studies suggest that the high amounts of fat could improve mitochondrial function and slow the disease progression. Having said that, if this is true, there are better ways to increase fat consumption if that's what's needed. The next diet, for example, number 2, the ketogenic diet. This is essentially carnivore plus some low-carbohydrate plants. The idea is to promote ketogenesis, where the body switches to using ketones for energy. We've actually got a podcast on this on the Food for Thought series. Again, studies that show benefits link it to mitochondrial function. It's purported that the ketone metabolism is neuroprotective and reduces oxidative stress and mitochondrial damage, which is in turn beneficial to MND patients. However, other studies have shown the opposite, that high-fat diets increase oxidative stress, and the long-term effects are not fully understood. The third diet is the paleo diet. This is built on the theory that modern humans are still genetically wired to the diet of Paleolithic ancestors. They didn't mill flour to make bread or add things like polysorbate 80 and carboxymethylcellulose to their foods. They ate what was available through hunter-gathering with large consumptions of lean meats, seafood, nuts, fruits, seeds and vegetables. In relation to motor neuron disease, it's reported in some studies that this dietary approach may inhibit the NF-kappa B pathway, which could be beneficial to preventing MND. The diet is also high in omega-3 fatty acids, which could decrease pro-inflammatory cytokine expression, and the diet may also lower cholesterol levels. However, these theories are lacking in quantity of hard evidence in relation to motor neuron disease, with many focusing on other effects, so more needs to be done here. Number 4 is the Mediterranean diet. Now, this is often heralded as one of the world's healthiest diets. It involves the consumption of high amounts of extra virgin olive oil, vegetables, fresh fruit, dairy products, fish, poultry, alongside moderate consumption of eggs, red meat, and red wine. It's a very fresh diet that boasts high amounts of antioxidants, fibre, omega-3s, etc., and these all may help protect against age-related cognitive decline. There's a lot more studies about this diet in comparison to the previous 3, and many demonstrate that it can reduce oxidative stress related to neuronal death in motor neuron disease. In vivo studies have demonstrated the neuroprotective effects of things like extra virgin olive oil, and human studies suggest potential benefits in improving multiple health markers in MND patients. However, not everyone is in agreement, and more rigorous studies, preferably double-blinded, are needed. And number 5, the vegan diet. This is the final diet we're going to look at today. It focuses on consuming only plant-based foods, fruits, vegetables, seeds, grains, nuts, legumes, etc. These foods are rich in antioxidants and anti-inflammatory components. We already know that eating lots of plants is good for us and can reduce the risk of developing something like Alzheimer's. We've got a few podcast episodes on this, and similar data exists for the Mediterranean diet. However, high consumption of plants has also been linked to a statistically significant reduction in motor neuron disease risk. The diet reduces levels of inflammatory markers like C-reactive protein, suggesting a reduction in chronic inflammation. In addition, omega-3 polyunsaturated fatty acids found in plant-based sources like flax seeds have been associated with neuroprotection and reduced MND risk. However, it's far too easy to say that you're vegan and just consume highly processed meat replacements. This will not reduce your risk of anything. Furthermore, some studies show that there isn't a significant difference in inflammatory markers between vegans and omnivores. That makes me wonder if the main thing is just to make sure your diet is as fresh as possible. I personally am vegan, and it's helped me overcome chronic illness, but maybe the removal of processed foods is the most important thing here. In summary, like with Alzheimer's disease, diet may play a potential role in managing and/or preventing motor neuron disease, with various dietary patterns showing promise in reducing oxidative stress and inflammation. However, conflicting evidence and methodological limitations necessitate further research to clarify the diet's efficacy and safety in motor neuron disease management. Understanding individual variability and dietary impacts will be crucial in developing personalised nutritional strategies for motor neuron disease. It's definitely a watch this space scenario.
Thank you for listening. Join the Dementia Research bloggers and share your own views.